when we say legislation, people tend to think that, we're talking about introducing new laws or new bills to do certain things in certain fashion or way, right? Is that what it is? Is that why do we need this? Because the average viewer would sit back and think, why do we need that much legislation just to restore a bridge or to have a new road here and there? Like, do we really need that much lobbying and legislation and people, senior people like your good self, going and talking and discussing with people, politics and people in power just to get things, basic things done?
Well, when you look at all the different legislation that is, just circulating around our national capitol building, our state capitol building, and, even our local cities, it's incredible how many different thoughts and ideas are out there that people think are the most important. And ACEC, we have a couple of takes or a couple of approaches. One is that we're really trying to protect our businesses and keep our businesses viable, because this state in particular needs consultants to help our Department of Transportation. They don't have enough staff to deliver the projects they have. And then you mentioned private work, so certainly developers need engineers. And so we there's kind of that angle of just making sure consultants are in business. And then there's also protecting the engineering industry in terms of, what does it mean to be a licensed engineer? What if somebody didn't think we needed licenses? Or what if somebody up here wanted to start selling, 3-story house plans for $99? Like, what does that mean? What does that do? Why does that upset engineers? So I think we are tasked with kind of looking at both angles. And ACEC is much more often on the defensive than we are on the offensive. And by that, I mean there are continuously new taxes, regulations, really great ideas for funding things on the backs of corporations that we really take some time to sit back and listen to and say, how does that impact a business? Particularly our small businesses. Some national businesses like Consor can take on a lot. But if you think about the, ACEC, 75% of the businesses that we represent are small businesses. Well, they can't take on a whole lot more. These are people who have leveraged their homes and their cars to start a business. And so we're really watching out for them and watching out for our licenses and, licensure in general. So there's a lot to look at. And every time our state legislature goes in session, we review, myself and my committee, there's about 10 of us, review about 300 bills, just making sure that there's not some angle that we should be supporting or defending ourselves against. So it's really both. It's really both.
And what's tougher, on the state level or on the national level? Going to legislators and talking about these different rules and regulations.
I think it's tougher on the state level because there's more at stake. Politics are local. My lobbyist is constantly telling me politics are local. The greater influence you can have on your city, that's going to have the greatest influence on your business or greatest impact on your business and yourself. On the national level, ACEC is pretty formidable in terms of our ability to lobby, and certainly, meeting with our federal senators and representatives is very important. But that machine is just ginormous. And I feel like I have much more power individually and supporting my business in the industry, going in and speaking with the legislators up at the state level. So I'm going to say that's tougher from that. Just the stakes are higher, it feels like.
Perfect. And, talking of transportation and infrastructure in general, I'm not sure about Oregon, but I know, in California, we have this mandate or vision to go fully electric vehicle with new car sales by 2035, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it's 2035, 2030, or 2035. I'm not sure. Now, the question continues to come up and rise every time we have this conversation, whether we are ready from an infrastructure perspective Do you have enough power from a power grid perspective? Do you have enough nodes for these electric vehicles to get charged at? Or not? And how ready are we? In other words, and will we meet that mandate or deadline of 2035 or not? And I'd like to hear from you with your experience and with your involvement with the DOT Oregon. What's going on there? You think, are we ready from a infrastructure perspective for something similar to happen?
Yeah, I don't think we are ready, and I don't believe I think we're on a path, but we are not on a path with that sort of trajectory. When you look at our electric grid, the interesting thing, moving from California, I grew up in California, so I know what power is like in California and how challenging it is because a lot of it comes from Oregon. So moving up here, my electric bill went way down from when I was in California. So I know what's going on, but the challenge up here is that the plants that are generating power are generally being dismantled. So I'm not sure how we increase our reliance on electric vehicles when we're essentially dismantling a lot of our power. So we're removing our dams. I don't know if there are coal-fired plants here. That just is not my expertise. But there are natural gas burning plants that are generating electricity, and those are generally being dismantled. So I don't see how
Dismantled or replaced with?
I don't think they're being replaced. I think they're just generally being dismantled. So the studies up here show that the reliability of our electric grid is decreasing and decreasing kind of rapidly. And I don't know what replaces it, honestly. I'm not hearing or seeing what's else is being added to kind of make up for what's being removed.
That's what I thought. The demand is increasing, not decreasing. So there's an increased demand, and then the supply is being dismantled, as you're putting it. How are they making for the difference? So just buying it from other states?
I think people are not talking about it. I honestly don't know. I'm not in the energy sector, so I don't understand all the intricacies there. I read and listen to the news, and my general impression is it's kind of going in the wrong direction, trying to increase demand, but reducing capacity within our system.
And from an infrastructure perspective, laying down the very basic passive infrastructure to get these power stations that can kind of pretty much charge these EV cars. Are there any plans on the state level to increase or to mandate, to legislate, exactly every shopping mall, every new development to have a certain number of nodes or a certain number of outlets where you can just plug in and charge your EV? Did these make it to these conversations? Have they made it to the legislative level or not? Yeah.
They haven't. Our legislature, when they consider transportation funding, they certainly are investing in charging stations, and things like down at the state level, things like rest areas are trying to be a few charging stations, and I drive a plug-in hybrid, and so I sort of understand what it takes when I get home and plug in my car to recharge it. And it's a little concerning to me that that there's an expectation that people will be driving down Interstate 5 trying to get to Disneyland from Portland or something, and you're going to stop every few hours and take 20 to 30 minutes if it's a fast charge. I don't understand how that's a realistic expectation. And then on the other side, I noticed as I'm driving, I do quite a bit of driving. Actually, my husband loves to drive, so we do a lot of driving around the country. And I'm watching rest areas and that type of infrastructure be closed. So I'm not sure how I don't know how those things all go together, frankly. I think it all sounds good when you're a legislator and you're out talking to people, but when you put pen to paper and pull out a calculator, I don't understand. I mean, again, I drive a plug-in hybrid because I can use electric going back and forth to work. That's fantastic. So that's great. And electricity is relatively inexpensive in Oregon, so it's all good. But if I'm going to go anywhere, like if I'm going to drive to Boise, Idaho, I need gas. I need gas, even if there were charging stations at the rest areas along the way.
And that
I
brings
just-
a really good question, which is, if the Department of Transportation main role is to set the overall strategy of where we're heading the next 4 years or 8 years, from a transportation perspective as a country, right? The main objectives we're trying to reach, the main strategy to get these objectives in place, and how we get there. If reducing emissions, carbon footprint, was one of these priorities, and I'm assuming it was, and promoting more and more electric vehicles, and we've seen that promotion in different shapes and forms, in different meetings and different kind of events out there, spoken by high-ranked officials in the government. I'm assuming if the Department of Transportation has that objective on the priority list, does that priority list gets cascaded down to the states or no? I'm assuming if that was there, then if I'm in Oregon and I'm the governor of Oregon and I have a Department of Transportation, I'm assuming that I would get a list from the Department of Transportation saying, listen, this is the direction that we're taking as a country. These are the priorities for us. We'd like you to align with our priorities and start kind of pushing this through down your organization, the public sector, your spending, your funding, everything, your projects, so that you're pretty much in line with where we're heading as a country. Is that happening?
So I think that's kind of how things generally work. And I think if you just follow the money, the national priorities, established by the administration, go down through the Department of Transportation, and they find their way to buckets of money at agencies like Federal Highway Administration. And once Federal Highways decides what their priorities are, that establishes what monies are available. And then the states, states don't fund a whole lot themselves. They rely on federal funds, and then they use local money to match. Oregon is a state that doesn't have a sales tax. It's very different up here than in California, where you have local sales taxes, where cities and counties can take some of that money and do what they want with it. Oregon chooses not to go that route. We have gas taxes, but we don't have a state sales tax. So we rely on where the federal government decides to put its money. And then the DOT clearly, if you want to do projects, then you are sort of following the buckets, using the buckets of money that are at your disposal. And if you wanted to do something different and access different dollars, you need to identify another funding mechanism at the local level. And because there's no state sales tax, again, like California, Bay Area and those counties, they leverage additional tax for projects, and that just is not the system up here. So we're very reliant on federal priorities, sort of set the state priorities.
If promoting electric vehicles is a priority for the Department of Transportation, and we're pushing funding down or availing some funds for states to take advantage of and go and promote that particular infrastructure boost to help that objective being retired, I'm assuming that you'll be hearing right now some legislative work around developers, for instance, because we keep talking about rest area and the main highways not having electric vehicle charging pods. But then what about where people live? And the majority of the people live in apartments. I can't think of a single apartment complex in the country that provides electric vehicle charging outlets where people park their cars when they come home at night, right? And I don't see this as even taking, as a point of discussion, taking enough attention from the legislators around the country. So that's another question. Like there is a disconnect at a certain point, between where the vision is, where we're heading as a country, and then in reality what's happening on the ground with these different authorities here and there within the states. Do you feel it happening in Oregon as well?
I do, and I would take you mentioned not having apartment complexes, not having vehicle charging stations. I would take that one step further in Oregon, particularly in the Portland metro area. And I would say that the transportation policies being set by those metropolitan counties is really based on getting people out of their cars altogether. So a lot of money is being allocated to enhancing bike paths, walking paths, and allowing people to walk, what we call up here active transportation. So don't use your car. In fact, a lot of people move to the Portland, the city of Portland, so that they don't have to have a car. And I think I'm noticing some of the policies in Oregon, especially in the metropolitan areas, are around not reducing the bottlenecks. It's almost let's not reduce the bottlenecks, because the plan for reducing carbon emissions is to reduce the number of cars altogether. In fact, there was an initiative to not allow trucks into the city of Portland limits, if you can imagine, until people realized, somebody stopped and thought, gosh, how do my groceries make it to, how do my groceries get delivered to my grocery store? Well, maybe, you don't you don't park at the city limits and then carry that stuff in. Doesn't work that way. So I think it's an interesting discussion around how folks with big ideas want you to live versus how the average citizen still currently lives, and the freedoms related to just getting in your car and going to the zoo or going and visiting your grandmother or whatever. I don't know when that comes to a head, but it kind of feels like eventually that will come to a head.
Very interesting, by the way. One of the major challenges that are pretty much consistent with every person that I interview, we host here on our show, is the lack of enough engineers, the lack of enough candidates, the shortage in engineers that we're facing nationwide. And it doesn't look like we're trending in the right direction by any means or form or shape. This gap continues to increase. The more projects we get, the more work is required to be done, the deeper this particular shortage shows up and expose itself. What's your take on this? Are you guys facing a similar challenge at Consor, and what are the solutions or remedies that you're considering to fill that gap?
We certainly are. We are not immune from what our entire industry is facing, this shortage of engineers. And one of the strategies that I'm employing as a manager is, it feels like it's incumbent upon the managers to go out and do more recruiting and go out and, find ways to get more engineers into college, et cetera. And I sort of have a different take. I am trying to leverage our younger staff and get them out to the colleges and even high schools and doing things through ASCE and APWA, who are doing fantastic things around really promoting engineering and trying to find more talent. And one of the things I recognize that our younger staff do, and I'm talking about the 1 to 5 year folks, they just got out of college. So they're super recognizable. They have friends. They love to go chat about the great job they have and the great projects they're working on. And then from a company perspective, we sort of have a gain because it gets them out publicly speaking and promoting the word of our company and all the great things we're doing. So I'm trying to leverage them while they're still super excited, don't have a bunch of kids at home, they're not trying to balance soccer games and all the other things.
True.
And they're not too old like me to show up, like people don't, college students don't identify with the likes of me. And so I'm trying to make sure, and Consor is very supportive. I'm trying to make sure that our younger staff are out there at career fairs and talking to folks. I'll give one plug for Oregon State University, or just the state of Oregon, has a program that I didn't know anything like it existed. And it is when you go to an Oregon university and want to study engineering, industry got together a few decades ago, and you go to college for 5 years. You're just on a 5-year plan. And one of those, you take 6 months during your junior year and you get an internship, full-time, fully paid. You get all of the benefits of working for a company. And then you go back to school. And then during your senior year, you take another 6 months. And part of it was to prevent our graduates from running down to California for a higher paying job or up to Washington for a higher paying job. And they learned that 80% of the students who go through that will come and work for a company that they interned for. And it's also good for the students because they're earning good money through college. Right now they're earning somewhere between $20 to $25 an hour full time. And so they're learning what it is that is out there in the industry. And it's just fantastic. It's just such a great feeder system for us. We take somewhere between 2 and 4 interns a year at the junior and senior level, and it's just been fantastic, absolutely fantastic for our industry. The other thing they do for civil engineering students is they try to make sure that one 6-month internship is with a public agency, and the other internship is with a private consultant. So those civil engineering students get to see both sides and make some career choices through that. So I think the state of Oregon is really investing in this as well. And some folks like me go down to the high school level and recruit high school students to go to like Oregon State or Portland State or Oregon Institute of Technology, and then head into that what we call the MECOP CCOP program. So we're investing in all sorts of ways.